Hi there, dimwits. This is Blondie.
And this is T.
Welcome to another episode of Grimwit with Dimwits. I hope everyone's been well. This episode deals with something that unfortunately affects a lot of people today. It's sad, but something that we feel is important and should be brought to light a little bit.
Absolutely.
So if you're ready, I'm ready.
I'm ready. Let's do this. So, can you ever imagine in today's world that a person could pass away in their apartment and go unnoticed for over 2 years? Some people may be thinking that 2 years might be a stretch, but people could die and it could take a bit longer than most to discover them if they are without family and are homeless, have a high-risk lifestyle, or are mentally ill. But how could this happen to a beautiful, young, vibrant 38-year-old woman who lives in the most populous city in the United Kingdom with, in 2003, a metropolitan area of over 8 million inhabitants? So the question is not only how could this happen, because that can and will be expanded upon in this episode, but more importantly, why did this happen?
Wow.
This story remains shrouded in sadness and mystery, but we hope to shine a light on how through various circumstances people can slip away right under our noses if we make assumptions and don't just pay a little attention. We wanted to focus on this story because it just seems so shocking that this could and did actually happen to a person. And I believe that her situation was not so different from many other women of that time. With the right set of circumstances, childhood tragedy, a lack of therapy for grief, and no parental guidance, it would be so easy for a young woman to end up making one poor decision after another, which in this case ended up being the perfect recipe for something outrageous such as this.
That's a lot of factors to take in.
It is. And there's a lot of story to go with it. Let's let the grim begin.
Let's let the grim begin.
Joyce Carol Vincent was born on October 19th, 1965 in Hammersmith, London, England. Her parents were originally from Grenada, which is a small island country in the Caribbean Sea at the southern end of the Grenadine island chain. Her mother was of Indian descent and unfortunately died when Joyce was at the tender age of 11 years old. Joyce was the baby of the family and had been extremely close with her mother. So her mother's passing had a huge emotional impact on her as a child.
That's rough, especially when you're young.
That's a really tender age too. I mean, you're preteen and going through some changes in life.
Right.
Could definitely use your mom in your life. Joyce had 4 older sisters, and they took on the responsibilities of taking care of their little sister and helped to raise her. I imagine this was not an easy task, as they were also just children and grieving the loss of their mother themselves. Joyce's father was a carpenter and worked very hard to provide for his family. I would assume there was some depression during this time, as her father seemed very unhappy following his wife's death. He threw himself into work and socializing, which left his girls to raise themselves as he became more and more distant from his children. So Joyce not only no longer had a mother, but emotionally she had lost her father as well. Obviously, there was a huge void in what remained of her fragile childhood. Like we were just saying, I can't imagine losing your mother's love and then losing the attention you would need a double dose of from your father, right?
I mean, it's hard enough for fathers to raise girls, but if your mother's gone, then you need to step up twice. And I understand he worked hard to support them, but the socializing...
everybody grieves a little differently. Maybe he was dealing with some loneliness.
It could be.
It's weird that, and we don't know all the circumstances, but it's weird that a parent with 5 girls would put himself first. I don't know that
maybe
for sure.
Maybe he just couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
That's why he threw himself into work. That was his justification. And then he worked so hard, he needed a little time for himself. It's not a good excuse, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, it could have happened that way. I'm not sure. Joyce attended an all-girls school, and even though she was popular and had lots of friends, she decided to drop out of high school when she was only 16 years old. There was no information about why she dropped out. It seemed that up until that time, she was just like most teenage girls. Nothing appeared significantly wrong. Joyce did go through a phase in her life where she hung out with a group of friends that were all about putting on appearances to look like they were from high-class backgrounds. Most of the girls were middle class, but were able to move in the higher class circles. Joyce even took lessons in elocution to rid herself of her neighborhood accent and pretend she was much more posh.
Elocution, is that way of speaking?
More clearly, more defined, to appear a bit more intelligent,
so
I believe.
Obviously UK, so she had an accent, or
She had a London accent, which from the way I'm reading the story was not very high class.
Oh.
And I hope I'm not wrong about that. Sorry, Londoners. We think you guys sound great. Don't take it personally.
No, I think the way they talk is amazing.
But that is important to the story because it just goes to show she wasn't happy with herself.
It's a self-esteem thing.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's nothing to do with that.
And probably because she had nobody there to work on that, build her up.
To guide her. No, makes sense. She's up to her own devices and she's already trying to jump ahead. And
right. And then in decision number one, you mentioned decisions. Decision number one, dropping out of school.
She's putting on airs and probably doesn't even know why at this point. So Joyce spent her young adult years working, dating, and moving forward with her life. She was very ambitious and had a series of jobs where she did very well and was embraced by her coworkers. Her social life was normal for a woman her age, and being a beauty just added to her dating success. But she did seem to be a bit codependent, and according to her friends, needed to have a man in her life at all times. She was always looking for Mr. Right.
And that's the sign. You need that attention. You need that confirmation.
Right.
You need that person to build you up. I feel better now that somebody else loves me. I feel better about myself.
You find value in that.
Yes.
Right. But apparently Joyce might have attracted and been attracted to some men that were not so good for her. A few of the men she dated became obsessed and, come to find out, even abusive toward her when she tried to leave the relationship. And I'll never understand how people can think that they can beat someone into staying in a relationship.
You know what, though? In some of the things I've read, that's low self-esteem.
On both sides.
On both sides. I'll keep you here or I'll kill you. Unfortunately, that's probably the mindset.
I'm guessing that too. That it's just sad.
They stay out of fear.
Exactly. It appeared that as the years went by, and Joyce was now in her mid-30s, she started to distance herself from her friends and family. When a person self-isolates, no matter what the reason may be, it truly can be detrimental to their emotional state. Nobody can help you if you refuse to let them. In 2001, after she quit her job, she cut off nearly everybody she knew and moved into the domestic abuse shelter and worked as a cleaner in a budget hotel. A source involved in the investigation said she detached herself from her family, but not due to any type of a blow-up. They were a nice family. We understand she was in a relationship and there was a history of domestic violence. So it has been speculated that she was either ashamed to be a victim of domestic abuse or did not want to be found by her abuser. But the more we discover about Joyce, it sounds like she may have had a good reason to try and hide herself away for a while. Then maybe, like in so many situations, we get used to our routine that should have only been temporary, and time flies. Before you know it, weeks, months, and years have passed.
I would imagine that if she feels safe, she has a job, she's involved with work, it's a safety issue at this point. She just feels comfortable and she's got complacent.
She's flying under the radar.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, that's what she needed in her life at that time. Because that job was not what she was capable of.
Mm-hmm.
So she's definitely, it seems like, flying under the radar. So now, let's fast forward to January 25th, 2006. A corpse was discovered on the floor in Joyce Vincent's apartment. The body was lying next to a big shopping bag and surrounded by Christmas presents that had yet to be wrapped. The television was on and tuned to BBC Channel 1. There was a mound of dirty dishes in the sink, and the mail was piled up behind the front door.
Oh, my goodness.
There was even a window left wide open. But when the officials went to look out the window, they noticed that it was covered in various types of insects. They were everywhere.
Hmm.
The remains were positively identified as Joyce through a holiday photo she had in her home that showed her smiling. Police positively identified her by visually comparing that photo with the teeth in the body. I just want to say, am I the only person who finds this form of identification super flimsy? It's totally prone to errors if they're just looking at teeth visually and then looking at the body.
They're not even using x-rays. They're just...
Yeah, they're just like you and I could go, that looks the same. And, we're not experts.
So, question, what year was this?
This is in 2006.
And then when was the last time someone saw her?
2003.
Did she ever get married?
No.
Or they just knew she had a boyfriend?
Right.
Okay.
Right. There was no way for any officials to know the exact date that Joyce had passed away, and the coroner could not validate anything specific because of advanced decomposition, which led to mostly skeletal remains. I'm having an issue with the word mostly. I mean, what could possibly have been left after all that time? That's disturbing. Nobody's fault, just I'm visualizing. I'm visualizing.
I completely understand. I'm trying in my head thinking, hair. Yeah.
Checking the refrigerator, food was found that had expired in 2003. So it was presumed that she died sometime in 2003 and was not discovered until 2006, which means she was dead 2 to 3 years completely unnoticed.
Oh, that's just awful.
It really is. Cause of death was believed to be either an asthma attack or complications from a peptic ulcer, both of which she had recently suffered prior to her death. She had been treated for an ulcer and had only been out of the hospital for a short period of time before December of 2003. So it sounds like officials are determining the cause of death based on her medical history. But again, I realized I didn't have much to work with. So it's as good a guess as any.
So was she still working in 2003?
Nope. She quit her job in 2001, and then she was doing the budget hotel cleaning, and then they don't really give a date of when she...
Oh, that'd be interesting to...
Yeah, so maybe she was. I take that back, but they don't give a date.
Maybe she just didn't show up and they just figured she quit.
I would imagine she would have to have quit, because wouldn't someone go looking for her if she hadn't quit? But who knows? That's what this whole story is all about, right?
Mm-hmm.
People not doing what other people would assume they would do. So when questioned, neighbors had assumed, here we go again, that whoever had lived there had moved out and the apartment was empty because there was absolutely no activity. They also thought that the foul odor of decomposing body tissue was due to the nearby waste bins. I guess the waste bins were right underneath Joyce's window, so everything kind of masked everything.
Well, that's a sad state.
I know. The apartment's windows did not allow a way for anyone to peek inside from the walkway outside of her apartment. And it was a noisy building, so nobody even noticed the constant noise from the television, which remained turned on the entire time.
For 3 years.
So let's get into how nobody came knocking at her door within this time span. In February 2003, Vincent was moved into the Bedsit flat above Wood Green Shopping City, which is a large shopping center and residential complex where she later died. This shopping center had over 100 retail shops with an average of 220,000 customers per week.
Wow.
They even have their own dedicated team of police for the shopping center. So there was police.
There was so much activity in the shopping center.
So there were hordes of people below her apartment. She did have a very unique situation with her apartment, though. It sat at the end of the walkway with no apartment above or below, as if it had been architecturally cut off. So that is just strange, but, contributes to this.
And that's probably one of the reasons why she picked it.
Maybe. Mm-hmm. That's a good point. The apartment was owned by the Metropolitan Housing Trust and was used to house victims of domestic abuse. The trust was established in the 1950s by Lady Molly Huggins for Colored People's Housing Association to provide good quality, affordable housing specifically for immigrants from the Caribbean. So half of Joyce's rent was paid automatically by Metropolitan Housing Trust benefits agencies, which led officials to believe that someone was still occupying the residence. Due to that portion of her rent being paid on time each month, her arrears did not get noticed for over 2 years. Which kind of sounds to me like somebody just dropped the ball. That's too long.
That's too long, and if she had to pay over and above whatever was provided...
Yeah, because that's only half. Wouldn't you miss half of the rent?
Why didn't somebody go after that?
Somebody.
Depending on how big this facility is, if it's over this huge shopping center, maybe there's more than one, and maybe because they know what type of situation it is, they kind of let it go.
I didn't get a number for the units, but it did sound like it was a big deal.
Facility,
yeah. Well, it sits on top of a huge shopping center, so there had to be a lot of units in there, I'm guessing.
I would think so.
To make matters worse, her electricity and heating were still running due to a debt forgiveness program. All her utility bills were continually being paid through automatic payments, but eventually, with half of the rent being unpaid, housing officials finally realized this and decided to evict her from the property. After knocking aggressively and thinking maybe she was in there and just didn't want to be evicted, they forced their way into the apartment where her decomposed body was discovered. They had not finally realized that she was not paying her half of the rent. She could have been there for maybe a few more years. Who knows?
Or if they would have realized it and checked in earlier.
Yeah. Like I said, just all these circumstances collided and just created this perfect recipe for this. What is even more sad is that Joyce lived in such a crowded and bustling city, and she was surrounded by people passing by. People below her in the huge shopping center that she lived above, and many, many neighbors. All she had to do was walk out her door once in a great while and interact with someone, anyone. Just a good morning, good evening, or have a nice day may have done the trick. She could have even sat alone in a public area of her building, catching some sun or reading a book, so people would know that she exists.
You were right earlier when you said she could have just been hiding.
Yeah, and I know there's probably some valid reasons why she just wanted to hide, but these little social interactions could have made the difference for her. Maybe not to save her life, or maybe so, who knows? But it could have led to her discovery much, much sooner.
So sad.
There's a documentary about Joyce Carol Vincent's life. It's called Dreams of a Life. That is a really, really good title for this, because she did dream of a life.
Having a life.
Right. A good life. And it was released in 2011. The movie focuses on discovering the truth about the life of a vivacious, intelligent woman and how she came to be so tragically forgotten. The director of the documentary, Carol Morley, was on a subway and found a discarded newspaper that highlighted this story but did not provide many details. Carol was drawn to it and knew she had to find out more. The image of the television flickering over the woman's decomposing body haunted her as she departed the train onto the extremely crowded platform. How could someone's absence go unnoticed for so long in a city like London, where over 8 million people lived? How could she have been forgotten? Joyce Vincent's story made global news and shocked people worldwide at the lack of community spirit in the UK. Even the story itself ran through the world's headlines with not much information about Joyce and not a single photo of her. It's almost as if they didn't want to humanize her. It was just a great headline, but the person involved wasn't important.
The person behind the story.
That part makes me sad.
The thing makes me sad.
Shortly after the initial shock of this story wore off, Joyce dropped out of the news completely, but people kept discussing her in internet chat rooms, wondering if she was just an urban myth. Some people even went so far as to talk down about her, as if it wasn't a big deal. She never mattered. People even were insensitive enough to call her a couch potato and posted snarky comments such as, "What's really sad is that no one noticed she was missing. She must have been one miserable, sorry to say it, bitch."
What is wrong with people?
I know.
I
That's
hope
disgusting.
those same people don't have people behind them saying the same things.
Yeah, that's disturbing. And I didn't know if I should say that or not, but I kind of wanted to make the point of how
insensitive
people are. Thank you. But then even the negative comments vanished. So Carol said she just couldn't let it go. She had to make a film about her. Good for Carol.
That's right.
Carol was inspired to spend 5 years seeking information, anything at all about Joyce Vincent and who she really was. What led her to dying all alone and nobody even noticing for years? Carol started with taking out ads in newspapers, and she put up posters all over the neighborhood where Joyce lived, asking anyone who knew anything about Joyce to contact her with any information. Carol even took cabs all over the city, asking random people if they knew her by showing them a poster with her photo. That's freaking dedication right there.
That's diligence, and good for her.
Good for her. I'm very impressed with her. Carol did receive responses from people who knew who Joyce was, but sadly they had no idea that she had passed away. And at this point, it was many years after her remains were discovered. One of the first people to contact Carol was an ex-boyfriend named Martin. Martin had seen the ad and wrote to her hoping that the Joyce in question was not the same Joyce he used to date in his 20s, but they quickly confirmed that it was definitely her. During a phone call, Martin stated that it didn't add up because the Joyce he knew was never a drinker or did any drugs. But after talking with Carol, he was most surprised that Joyce, who had always been so ambitious, ended up in public housing.
Okay, wait, I have a question. He was surprised because she didn't drink or do drugs?
Meaning is like she didn't have a high-risk lifestyle. So how could something like this have happened to her?
And that's just a stretch.
I don't think it's a stretch at all. When people have a high-risk lifestyle, family members lose track of them.
And that I understand.
I think that's what he's trying to say.
I just, it's not around to me, but.
I got it.
Continue.
It was actually at the beginning of this story.
I was just helping you and the listeners reiterate what you had said earlier.
Martin and Joyce had met in 1985 when he worked for a shipping company, and Joyce was the 20-year-old secretary to his boss. Martin claims that Joyce asked him out many times, and eventually he agreed, and they ended up dating for about 3 years.
She asked him out?
Yep, that's cute. What he says. I know, good for her. Once they broke it off, they remained friends and kept in touch till about 2002. Martin shared that they had a lot of fun together. Racing at Goodwood, tennis at Wimbledon, classical music concerts, and they both enjoyed opera as well. He said, she always wanted to improve her mind. Actually, she told me she had taken elocution lessons so she would sound posh and nobody would know she was from London. He was able to provide photos and background information about Joyce. He said everyone thought she looked like Whitney Houston. Her hair came from her mother's side. It was thick and wavy. He never met her family, which he thought was kind of weird. He also said that she had great jobs and made good money. She was very, very ambitious. She had wanted to marry him, but he wasn't ready to settle down. He showed Carol an address book where he had crossed out Joyce's address and rewrote it many times because of how often she moved. It was at least once a year, and he never could figure out why she moved so often.
That's interesting.
It's very telling. It's expensive to move, and nobody likes to move. I mean, who wants to do that? Never again will I move. So I wonder what she was really running from.
Yeah, that does sound she is hiding.
Yeah. Another friend, John Ianu, said after hearing of how she died, he felt very guilty. He never made time to go and visit with her. They had only stayed in contact over the phone. He had hung out with her and Martin, and they always had fun. He said, the trouble with Joyce was that she was very fanciable. Wherever she went or whatever she did, there were always people trying to get her into bed. It was a burden that she was so beautiful and clever, a lot more intelligent than she let on. I think she had lived several lives.
Well, that's an interesting statement.
It is. It says a lot about Joyce, though. Mm-hmm. John talked to Carol about the documentary she was trying to make about Joyce, and he said, I want to know Joyce's story myself. And that sounds ridiculous coming from someone who actually
She
knew
knew
her.
her.
There must have been signs she would end up this way, but if there were, she covered them up with this happy-go-lucky, having a great time act. She died of neglect. We all loved her, but not enough to stop her dying.
Oh,
Isn't that sad?
that's sad.
He's a very good speaker. Carol also spoke with coworkers from Ernst & Young, one of the biggest accountancy firms in the world. They stated that Joyce worked there for 4 years and was very responsible and well respected. She was also engaged for 2 years during her time at E&Y. Carol contacted that man, but he wished to remain anonymous. Her colleagues were very surprised when she up and quit, but she told them she was going to travel the world with 20 friends. It all sounded so glamorous, but instead, we know she ended up in a Victims of Domestic Violence program. After finding this out, her coworkers felt like they were discussing 2 completely different people. The Joyce they knew was always upbeat and happy. They had no idea about the domestic abuse. It does make you wonder what was really going on, said her coworker Dan. He also stated that it's shocking to think that 2 years after she left our company, she was dead. They really couldn't comprehend because she was so well liked. Nobody even had an answer as to why they didn't stay in touch. They felt really guilty about that.
So you have this fiance that wants to remain anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
They break up. She quits.
And kind of goes into
And
hiding.
then she moves and moves and moves.
That makes you wonder.
Mm-hmm.
As time went on, she received messages from Joyce's old school friends. Many made mention of her beauty and how much she loved to sing. She had a fantastic singing voice. A fellow musician and a friend of Joyce, Kirk Thorne, recorded Joyce in his studio. He said she was really driven and special. He claimed that if she was white, she could have been a debutante, a classy lady. He was also very surprised that she didn't have a boyfriend at 38. With all the attention she received, she never had any trouble with finding a man. Lots of women were very jealous of her. Kirk stated that Joyce had a dream of becoming a recording artist, and maybe not fulfilling that dream may have had something to do with her depression and isolation.
Oh, could be.
Her friend, Catherine Clark, stated her beauty may have worked against her because so many men wanted to be with her, and she couldn't believe how intense some of these men were. She actually wasn't surprised that Joyce ended up in an abuse shelter because some of these guys she dated would just not let go. And she thinks Joyce may have been embarrassed by her choice of men and stayed away from her family because she knew those choices played into these obsessive situations.
This is a woman, from what you've said, she's intelligent. She can sing. She's classy by her own design. She sounds like she's the whole package.
Got it together. Even a woman like that can fall
Right.
into these types of situations, and it sounds like it happened repeatedly.
I have to wonder if it is stemming from when she was 11 and she didn't get that confidence and the self-esteem and all the lessons that your parents should teach you.
But she's living her life as if she's trying to surpass and have this different life that she's dreaming about, that she wasn't born into. So it's kind of like she's living on both sides. You're trying to be this person, yet in reality, you're compromising
and you're allowing yourself to be a completely different person.
Exactly. Judy Cheeks, an American disco singer, once took Joyce out to dinner where they dined with Stevie Wonder. Judy
Wow.
said, I know, right? This is crazy. Judy said that Joyce was always looking for the man of her dreams, and she assumed that she had found him and was living a great life, which was why she didn't hear from her anymore. Alistair Abrahams, a former boyfriend of Joyce's, who had also been a tour manager for soul singer Betty Wright, was now in his early 50s, described Joyce and the 2 years they lived together. He said she was always immaculately attired. She had an aura about her as well as physical beauty, but he thought it was very strange that Joyce never talked about her past. In fact, she was quite secretive about it. It was like she came with no past at all.
She's trying to hide her bad decisions and what happened to her.
Well, I mean, like not even her family, because remember Martin said that he never met her family after
Right.
dating for what, 3 years?
Yeah.
So she's definitely hiding everything, and it makes you wonder why. Alastair then recalls a moment when he had taken her to Wembley in 1990 to see a Nelson Mandela tribute concert. Joyce ended up backstage meeting and talking to Anita Baker, Denzel Washington, and Isaac Hayes, big-time celebrities, and she was thrilled.
Sounds like she was very charming.
Yes, and put into situations that most people can only dream about.
And sounds like she lived up to
like that. She fit right in.
Right.
Yeah, she fit right in. This part makes me sad. Alastair had a film from the concert. He pulled it out and went through it, looking for that very special moment. He finally found it. There was Joyce, moving and alive, shaking Mandela's hand. Then she turned to smile at someone behind her. At that moment, she was resurrected, 26 years old, intelligent, ambitious, and beautiful. Hard to believe that in 12 years, she would die and absolutely nobody would notice.
It makes you flutter because
It does.
How far have you fallen or gone, or what's affected you to go that far?
It doesn't even sound like she did anything to deserve it. It's just her circumstances that allowed all of this to happen. It's truly heartbreaking. Carol stated that after reflecting on Joyce not being missed, she could understand why nobody she knew really worried about her. They all thought she was living her best life and accomplishing all those goals she had set for herself. She was very good at masking her pain. I think we all know a lot of people like this, and I would never think that something this tragic could happen based on their happy facades. People know how to put on a happy face no matter what's going on in the background.
We're all guilty of it. It still makes you wonder, as a friend, a Christmas card or calling on their birthday, or
it would have taken one person to reach out. That's it. Alarms would have went off.
And making assumptions is definitely, you know what they say about assumptions.
I know.
Assuming.
Yep. The police were urged to reopen this investigation into her case, but they stated that there was no point in that. They investigated, and no foul play was suspected. The front door was double locked, and there was no sign of a break-in. At the time of her death, she had a boyfriend, but police could not locate him. The coroner recorded the death as unascertained. I don't know if that's the same boyfriend she had when she was at Ernst & Young, or maybe this was a different boyfriend. It doesn't really specify.
And how do they know she had another boyfriend? That's interesting.
Yeah, someone knew. As I stated earlier, Joyce didn't fit the typical profile of someone who might die and be forgotten. She wasn't old without family. She wasn't a loner, a drug addict, or even a heavy drinker. Who she was and the circumstances of her death and how she could be completely forgotten remained a mystery. Her sisters had hired a private eye to look for her and had actually found where she was living, and the family wrote letters, but because she had already passed away, they received no responses from her, and after many attempts, they concluded that she deliberately broke ties with them.
Oh, nobody went to visit her.
Yep. Carol was able to contact Joyce's 4 sisters. They had all asked her not to make the film about Joyce, but Carol went ahead and did it anyway. But she did give them an opportunity to see the film before in order to show that she was being respectful.
Oh.
Vincent's life and death were the topic of the docudrama Dreams of Life, a 2011 film. The film and Vincent's life inspired musician Steven Wilson's album Hand, Cannot, Erase. On November 4th, 2014, the English musician announced that his 4th CD release would be based on the life of Vincent. According to Wilson, he was inspired to create a concept album after seeing Dreams of a Life. From the book that accompanied the deluxe release of the album, it is clear that the central character, H, is a highly fictionalized version of Joyce. Lynn Featherstone of Hornsey and Wood Green, Joyce's constituency, stated, We don't know how big a part Joyce played in her own isolation, or whether it was more down to society neglecting her. But the point is, Joyce Vincent is dead, and no one murdered her, and no one seems to care that much. I gather she was very beautiful, which makes it more poignant because we always think beautiful people have everything going their way. Then Lynn took a good look at the apartments where Joyce died, and she said, I suppose, in a way, we all walked by.
Oh.
That's sad, right?
And very poignant.
Yeah, I think it spoke volumes.
It did. Again, you have friends throughout your life, and I guess we're fortunate now because we do have social media and we do keep in contact with our friends.
Much easier.
It is much easier than making that phone call that goes unanswered or sending that letter that goes unanswered. We can actually contact them directly, or we know somebody that knows of our friend. You see posts of people you knew in high school.
Right. And everyone has a phone on their person everywhere they go.
They
so,
do.
If someone, even if you try to call someone and they don't answer their cell phone, they have their cell phone, and that alone would set off an alarm if they don't respond.
Or text. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's more people text anymore than they do actually talk.
Which is kind of tragic, but that's another story.
Yeah. Another time.
Yep. But this story, I thought it just showed that we all need to care for one another, pay attention to each other. You never know what people are really going through.
You don't.
And something like this could happen. She just slipped through the cracks, and it was nobody's fault. And like Lynn said, nobody murdered her. But it's sad that it went on for this long. It seems so disrespectful at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Gosh, nobody expects to go out that way. Even just to die alone in your apartment is tragic, but then not to be discovered for all that time is just, like I said, it wasn't meant to be. And it's not anybody's fault, but it does seem like nobody cared.
And it seemed like after she did pass away, it was a blip.
Right. So many circumstances came together to allow this to go on for so long.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a typical situation for most people that everything would come together that way and things would be taken care of and nobody would notice. But it is sad. And I imagine, like I said, it could happen again. Mm-hmm. We all need to stay in touch and care for one another. We really do.
Right. Caring for each other, looking out for each other. And that does bring up the point that you wonder if part of her circumstances were from domestic abuse, from all of these men that I'm assuming she dated a lot, but they were all trying to date her, put it that way.
They were all in her life. Well, we don't even know how many there were, but it sounds like there were a few men that were in her life.
A few that tried.
And maybe at some point she didn't want them in her life anymore. And this is what changed all of her life choices. Mm-hmm. I do think that, at least the way the story is told, that was probably the catalyst for why she went into hiding.
The domestic abuse.
Right.
I did do a little research and look at a few things about domestic abuse. I was very surprised to hear that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men suffer domestic violence in some form.
I'm surprised and I'm not surprised. I don't know if that makes any sense. Well, like I didn't want to think it was that high, but it doesn't shock me that it is.
The other part of that is these numbers are continually growing and unknown because there are a lot of victims that do not report it. So it could be even higher than that.
I truly think that more people don't report it. I imagine it's probably more than double.
Because they're embarrassed. They are trying to put this front on, be happy, go around the world with 20 friends.
Exactly.
Just so they don't have to deal with their self-esteem and what is actually going on with them. So I think that, like you said, all the addresses was definitely a form of hiding. I did look at a few other things, and they say individuals who have endured physical or mental abuse are at high risk for development of mental health conditions such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and suicidal thoughts. They also went on to say victims may also experience loss of agency, meaning they no longer feel in control of their lives or what happens to them. This can create feelings of hopelessness or cause them to shut down.
It sounds like maybe that's exactly where she was.
Yeah.
Hopeless, shutting down, maybe hoping time would heal everything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what the long-term plan was for her hiding out, but the fact that she had Christmas presents surrounding her when she died, it sounded to me like she was ready to reach out And
I did find that interesting for somebody who did not have any friends.
Right. That nobody...
Why would she have all of these Christmas presents ready to wrap? When you brought that up, I was going to mention that, and I thought, well, I'll let you continue. But that is...
It's super interesting. Who were these presents for? And they don't say anything about the presents themselves. Were they for a man? Were they for a woman?
Child?
Were they for children?
Mm-hmm.
They don't mention any of that, but I thought that was super interesting. Maybe she was about to turn a corner in her life, and then this happened. Mm-hmm. So even more sad.
One of the other things that I did find very interesting when I was looking at domestic violence, I had a source that said domestic violence victims also may experience low self-esteem, shut people out of their lives, not to participate in activities they once enjoyed, and not to be able to trust others.
Yep. Well, it sounds to me like she definitely had some trust issues.
It definitely does.
And probably for some very valid reasons, which just makes her a victim for so many reasons, many times over. It's just a tragic, tragic story.
My takeaway from this is I'm definitely going to start making phone calls, even if it's just sending texts people I haven't talked to in a while, reaching out.
Those things are important. You may think they're not very important, but come to find out, could make a difference for somebody.
And never assume. Never assume that
assume
they're doing well. Maybe fine and have a job moving on, but that doesn't mean they're happy and doing well.
Very true. People definitely know how to put on airs.
They do.
Well, everybody, we hope that you found this story interesting. It is very, very sad, but I'm hoping that we all take a little something away from this and reach out to the people you love and care about.
And even people you haven't talked to in years, don't ever assume that they're doing well.
Right. Okay. Thank you all for listening.
Take care, and don't forget to let your imaginations run wild.
Bye-bye. We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits and Facebook Grimwit with Dimwits to listen for our new episodes, and feel free to share with your grim-loving friends. We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.